Good evening, and welcome back to Mindscape. Tonight, you're invited to slow down, to let the day gently fade, and to step into a quiet winter world, a place where nothing is expected of you, and rest comes naturally.
The world had grown quiet in the way it always does when snow begins to fall in earnest, not in flurries or gusts, but in that slow, purposeful descent that seems to soften every edge and silence every sound. It was the kind of snowfall that made you want to pause at windows, to watch the white curtain thickening between you and everything beyond, to feel the particular hush that settles over fields and forests and sleeping towns when winter truly arrives. Somewhere in that vast whiteness, where the land rolled gently between dark evergreens and frozen streams, where valleys cradled themselves in drifts and mountains held their peaks against pale skies, there was a railway line. It was old, this line, worn smooth by decades of passing wheels, and it curved through the landscape with the unhurried grace of something that had always been there and would always remain. The tracks stretched onward through territories that seemed to exist outside of ordinary time, through places where lanterns glowed with a light that was somehow both golden and silver, where chimney smoke rose in perfect vertical lines, where icicles hung from eaves like crystallized music. And along this line, when the snow fell thickest and the night grew deepest, a train would travel. It was not a train that kept to schedules or hurried toward destinations. It moved with the deliberate slowness of breath, of tides, of seasons turning. Its wheels turned with a rhythm so steady and low that it became less a sound and more a feeling, a gentle pulse that seemed to synchronize with the heartbeat of anyone who heard it. The windows of its carriages glowed softly, casting long rectangles of warm light across the snow, and inside, the air held that particular quality of protected warmth, the kind you feel when you've come in from cold and darkness into safety and shelter. Tonight, the train was preparing to depart from a small station that sat at the edge of a forest. The station itself was barely more than a platform, a simple wooden structure with a steep, peaked roof heavy with snow, and a single lantern that swayed slightly in the winter air, its light catching on the falling flakes and turning them to gold before they drifted past and became white again. The platform was empty except for the snow, which had covered the boards in a blanket so pristine that it seemed a shame to disturb it. And yet there were footprints there, leading from the forest path to the train's open door. If you had been watching from somewhere warm and distant, perhaps from one of those houses whose windows glowed in the valley below, you might have seen a figure standing on that platform, someone wrapped in layers against the cold, their breath rising in slow clouds that hung in the air before dissolving. You might have noticed how still they stood, how they seemed to be listening to something beyond the reach of ordinary hearing, to the particular silence that snow creates when it falls through darkness onto a world already asleep. The train waited as it always waited, with infinite patience. Its engine breathed in long, slow cycles, each exhalation sending a gentle plume of steam into the night air where it mingled with the falling snow. There was no urgency in that breathing, no impatience. The train existed in a state of perpetual readiness, content to wait for hours or moments. It made no difference. Time moved differently here, stretched and softened like honey in winter, like light through frosted glass. Inside the nearest carriage, the interior was exactly as it should be. The seats were upholstered in deep fabric the color of winter berries, worn soft by countless journeys, and each seat had beside it a small brass lamp with a shade of amber glass that turned the light honey warm. The floor was covered in carpet that muffled footsteps to whispers, and the windows, though frosted at their edges, were clean and clear at their centers, offering views of the snow-laden world beyond. A gentle warmth emanated from somewhere unseen, perhaps from pipes beneath the floorboards, perhaps from the walls themselves, and it was the kind of warmth that doesn't overwhelm but simply exists, reliable and constant, like the warmth of sun-heated stone or bread fresh from the oven. The carriage was empty now, waiting, and in that emptiness there was a quality of invitation, of welcome. It was the emptiness of a room prepared for a guest, of a bed turned down in anticipation, of a table set with care. Everything was ready, had been ready, would always be ready. You might imagine yourself there if you wished. You might imagine that you are the figure standing on the platform, that those footprints in the snow are yours, that the breath rising in clouds is the breath from your own lungs, slow and steady and visible in the cold air. You might imagine that you've been walking for some time, though you cannot quite remember from where, and that the forest behind you is dark and deep and filled with the particular quietness that evergreens hold when they're heavy with snow. You would notice, if you were standing there, how the cold feels against your face, crisp and clean, and how it makes the warm air from your breath seem all the more precious. You would notice the weight of your coat, the way it hangs from your shoulders, heavy with good wool or down, and the layers beneath it, each one adding its measure of protection against the winter night. You would feel your boots, solid and sure beneath you, keeping your feet dry despite the snow, and perhaps you would notice how your toes have grown slightly cold. Not uncomfortably so, but enough to make you aware of them, enough to make the promise of warmth ahead seem all the more inviting. The train's door stands open, and a set of metal steps leads up from the platform. They are clear of snow, as though someone has swept them moments before, or as though the snow, out of some strange courtesy, has chosen not to settle there. A hand railing, cold beneath gloved fingers, curves upward, and beyond the threshold, the golden light of the interior spills out into the night. There is no conductor visible, no ticket taker, no official presence to grant permission or deny it. The train simply waits, and the open door is answer enough. This is a journey that requires no credentials, no proof of purpose. The train will carry whoever comes to it, whoever finds their way through the winter dark to this small station at the forest's edge. If you were to climb those steps, and you can imagine it now, slowly, feeling each step solid beneath your feet, hearing the small sound your boots make on the metal, a muffled clang that is immediately softened by the snow and the night. If you were to climb those steps and cross the threshold into the warm interior, you would feel the change immediately. The cold would fall away like a cloak being removed, and the warmth would enfold you, gentle and encompassing. You would smell something comforting, though you couldn't quite name it. Perhaps wood smoke, perhaps cinnamon, perhaps simply the smell of warmth itself, of heated air and old wood and safety. You might pause there in the doorway, just for a moment, looking back at the platform and the forest and the falling snow, and you would see how beautiful it all is, how perfect in its winter stillness. The lantern still swings slightly, and your footprints are already beginning to fill, the snow settling into them with patient determination, erasing evidence of your passage. In an hour, they will be gone completely, and the platform will be pristine again, waiting for whoever might come next, tomorrow night or the night after, or perhaps not for months or years. It doesn't matter. The train will wait. Then you would turn and move deeper into the carriage, and the door would close behind you with a soft sound, a gentle click that carries no finality, only the quiet certainty of something settling into place. The train would know somehow that you are aboard, that you are settled, that you are ready, and it would begin to move. The beginning of that movement would be so gradual that you might not notice it at first. There would be no lurch, no sudden acceleration, only a subtle shift, a gentle easing forward. The platform would begin to slide past the windows, very slowly, and then the forest would begin to move, tree by tree, each snow-covered evergreen processing past like a silent witness. The rhythm of the wheels would establish itself, that low, steady sound that is less heard than felt, a pulse in the floor, in the walls, in the very air of the carriage. You would choose a seat, perhaps, moving down the aisle with slow steps, steadying yourself with one hand on the backs of the seats as you pass, though the train's movement is so smooth that you barely need the support. You might choose a seat by a window so you can watch the winter landscape unfold, or you might choose one further back, where you can feel the warm wall of the carriage at your shoulder. Either way, when you settle into the seat, you would feel how perfectly it receives you, how the cushions seem to adjust to your particular shape, how the armrests are positioned exactly where your arms want to rest. You would remove your coat, perhaps, feeling suddenly too warm in all those layers, and you would drape it over the seat beside you, watching it settle into a soft heap of fabric. And beneath it, you would be wearing something comfortable, something soft, a sweater perhaps, or a shirt of flannel, something that feels gentle against your skin. Your boots you might leave on, or you might ease them off and feel your feet, freed from their confines, relax and spread slightly. The thick socks you're wearing more than sufficient in the train's gentle warmth. Outside the window, the forest continues to slide past, and now the train is moving through the heart of it, through corridors of evergreens whose branches hang low with accumulated snow. The trees are so close that you can see individual needles, individual crystals of ice catching the light from the train's windows. Everything is monochrome in the darkness, black and white and infinite shades of gray, except where the train's light touches, and there everything turns briefly gold before sliding back into shadow. There is something deeply restful about this movement, about being carried forward through the night without effort, without choice, without any need to navigate or decide. The train knows where it is going, and you are simply a passenger, free to rest, to watch, to let your mind wander or still as it chooses. The rhythm of the wheels is hypnotic, a repeated phrase that your heartbeat begins to echo and your breathing slows to match it, deep and steady and calm. The carriage sways very slightly, a gentle rocking that is barely perceptible, and it reminds you of being rocked as a child, of boats on calm water, of hammocks in summer, of any motion that is rhythmic and safe and designed to carry you towards sleep. The warmth wraps around you like a blanket, and the amber light from the small lamp beside your seat creates a circle of golden illumination that feels like protection, like a boundary between you and the darkness beyond. You might close your eyes for a moment just to feel the motion more fully, and behind your closed lids you would still see the afterimage of the snow, still sense the gentle swaying of the carriage, still hear the low rhythm of the wheels. Or you might keep them open, watching the forest give way gradually to more open spaces, to clearings where the snow lies deep and unbroken, where the train's light reaches out and illuminates nothing but whiteness, pure and complete. Time passes, though you cannot say how much. It might be minutes, it might be longer. The train maintains its steady pace, never hurrying, never slowing, and the landscape continues to unfold beyond the windows in an endless procession of winter scenes. There are moments when you pass through deeper forest where the darkness is almost complete, and the train seems to move through a tunnel of shadow, and then suddenly you emerge into clearings where starlight reflects off snow and everything is luminous, and the sky above is vast and clear and filled with more stars than you've ever seen. Crystalline points of light that seem close enough to touch. Sometimes, very faintly, you can hear the train's whistle, a sound so low and mournful and beautiful that it seems to belong to the night itself, to the winter, to the snow. It doesn't startle you. Instead, it settles something in your chest, some nameless tension easing at the sound. The whistle speaks of distances, of journeys, of lonely outposts and distant hearths, but it speaks of them with fondness, with a sort of gentle melancholy that contains no sadness, only acknowledgement, only acceptance. The carriage is still empty except for you, and you begin to feel comfortable in that solitude, to appreciate it. There is no need for conversation, no social requirement, no performance necessary. You can simply be, simply exist in this warm, moving space, carried forward through the winter night toward whatever destination the train has chosen. And perhaps there is no destination. Perhaps the journey itself is the purpose, the point, the gift. You might let your head rest against the window, feeling the cold of the glass against your temple, a pleasant contrast to the warmth of the carriage, and through the glass you can feel the faint vibration of the train's movement, a gentle tremor that runs through you like a second heartbeat. The cold from the window is not unpleasant. It serves to define the warmth around you, to make it more precious, more noticeable. Outside, the landscape begins to change again. The train is descending slightly now, following the contour of the land down into a valley, and you can see, far below, the scattered lights of a small town or village. The lights are few and far between, golden specks in the darkness, and they speak of homes, of families settled in for the night, of fires burning in hearths, of lamps left burning in windows for travelers who might pass in the night. The train does not stop at this town. It curves around it, keeping to the higher ground, but close enough that you can see the shapes of buildings, the spires of churches, the long shadows cast by street lamps onto snow-covered streets. You wonder, in a distant, dreamy way, what it would be like to live in such a place, to wake each morning to this landscape of snow and silence, to know your neighbors by name, to have routines shaped by winter's demands. But the thought is idle, requiring no answer, and it drifts away as easily as it came, replaced by simple observation, simple presence in this moment, in this moving warmth. The train begins to climb again, following the valley's far side upward, and now the forest returns, thicker than before, the trees ancient and massive, their trunks so wide that 3 people linking hands could not encircle them. These trees have stood for centuries, perhaps for millennia, and they hold their snow with patient dignity, like elders bearing witness. The train passes between them like a thread being drawn through fabric, leaving no mark, disturbing nothing. And it is here, in this ancient forest, that you first sense something else, some other presence in the winter landscape. It is not threatening, not alarming, but simply there, a quality of attention, of awareness, as though the forest itself is conscious and watching, not with scrutiny, but with the calm observation of something that has seen countless winters and will see countless more. The feeling grows stronger as the train continues to climb, winding its way up the mountainside in long, lazy curves, and you find yourself looking more carefully at the darkness between the trees, at the shadows that pool in hollows and beneath low branches. You are not afraid. Fear has no place here in this warm carriage, on this gentle journey, but you are curious, attentive, wondering. And then, quite suddenly but without surprise, as though some part of you knew this was coming, the forest opens up and the train emerges onto a high plateau. And there, across a distance of perhaps a mile, separated from the tracks by a field of pristine snow that glows almost blue in the starlight, stands a house. It is a large house, though not a mansion, built of dark wood and stone, with a steep roof designed to shed snow and tall windows that would, in daylight, command views of the entire valley below. Right now, those windows are mostly dark, but in one, a window on the upper floor, tucked beneath the eaves, there is a light burning, warm and steady, and you can just make out the shadow of someone moving past it, though the distance is too great to see more than that. Just a momentary interruption of the light, a suggestion of presence. The house sits alone on the plateau, with no other buildings visible anywhere nearby, no roads leading to it except a narrow track that emerges from the forest and winds through the snow to the house's door, and even that track is barely visible now, being rapidly filled by the falling snow. Behind the house, the mountain rises higher still, its peak lost in clouds or darkness, and the house seems pressed against the mountain's flank, sheltering there, held close. There is something about this house, about its solitude and its single lighted window, that catches at something in your chest. It seems both lonely and self-sufficient, both isolated and complete unto itself. You wonder who lives there, who keeps that lamp burning in the window on this winter night while the rest of the world sleeps. You wonder if they know the train passes, if they hear its whistle echoing off the mountain, if they ever come to their window and watch its lights move through the darkness below their perch. The train does not slow or stop. It continues its steady progress across the plateau, but the house remains visible for a long time, and you keep your eyes on that single lighted window and on the shadow that occasionally passes across it, and you begin to construct a story, the way anyone might, filling the emptiness with imagination. You imagine someone living there alone, someone who has chosen this isolation deliberately, who has climbed to this high place to be separate from the world below. You imagine them as stern, perhaps, or sad, or simply weary, someone who has retreated from complexity into simplicity, from noise into silence. You imagine the interior of that house, rooms furnished sparsely but comfortably, books lining the walls, a fire burning in a large stone hearth, windows that in daylight reveal the endless vista of mountains and valleys and sky. And you imagine the person who lives there, though you cannot see them, cannot know them, as someone who stands at that window sometimes and looks out over the snow-covered world below with an expression that might be peaceful or might be yearning, might be contentment or might be regret. Someone who has made choices, as everyone must, and who lives with those choices in this high, quiet place, tending their fire, keeping their lamp lit, watching the seasons turn with the patience of someone who has nowhere else they need to be. The train carries you past, and the house begins to recede behind you, and you turn in your seat to keep it in view as long as possible, watching that single lighted window grow smaller and smaller until finally the forest closes in again and the house is lost to sight, though the memory of it remains, clear and somehow important, though you cannot say exactly why. The train continues to climb, and the air in the carriage seems to grow even warmer, even more comforting, as though in compensation for the increasing cold outside. You settle back into your seat, pulling your coat over your legs like a blanket, and you feel your body relaxing more deeply, your muscles releasing tensions you didn't know they were holding. Your shoulders drop, your jaw unclenches, your hands, which had been lightly gripping the armrests, soften and open. The rhythm of the wheels continues its steady pattern, and now it seems to be inside you as much as outside, your heart and lungs and blood all moving to the same slow cadence. Your thoughts begin to drift, becoming less linear, more dreamlike, images and feelings replacing words and logic. The window beside you has fogged slightly from your breath, and you reach out with one finger and draw a simple shape in the condensation, a star perhaps, or a snowflake, and watch it glisten for a moment before beginning to fade, the warmth of the carriage erasing it slowly, returning the glass to transparency. Outside, the forest has thinned, and the train is traveling now along an exposed ridge, with drops on either side falling away into darkness. Far below, you can see the silver thread of a frozen river, its surface catching starlight, and beyond it, more forests, more mountains, more of this endless winter landscape that seems to stretch to the edges of the world. The scale of it is humbling, making you feel very small and yet somehow part of it all, connected to the vastness by your presence in it, by your passage through it. The train begins to descend again, following the ridge down toward a new valley, and as it descends, the snow begins to fall more heavily. The flakes are larger now, drifting past the window in slow spirals, each one visible for a moment before being lost in the general whiteness. They accumulate on the window's outer edge, building up a soft frame that narrows your field of view, creating a vignette effect that makes the world outside seem even more distant, even more separate from the warm, protected space of the carriage. You find yourself thinking again about the house on the plateau, about its solitary occupant, and the thoughts unfold slowly, without urgency, like a story being told beside a fire. You imagine that person's days, the routines they might have built for themselves, the small rituals that give shape to time. You imagine them waking before dawn, the house cold despite banked embers in the hearth, and you imagine them rising anyway, lighting lamps, building up the fire, setting water to boil for tea or coffee. You imagine them standing at that window you saw, watching the sun rise over the distant mountains, watching the light spread across the snow, turning everything rose and gold before settling into the clear light of day. You imagine them spending their days in quiet occupation, reading perhaps, or writing, or working with their hands at some craft that requires patience and attention. You imagine them taking walks in the afternoon when the light is best, following the same paths through the snow again and again until the paths are worn deep, until they could walk them blindfolded, every turn and dip known by heart. You imagine them pausing sometimes on these walks, standing still in the snow and the silence, just listening, just being, the way one does when alone in winter, when there is no need to perform presence for anyone else. And you imagine their evenings, the lamp lit early against the early darkness, a meal prepared and eaten slowly, sitting at a table near the fire, and then the night stretching out ahead, hours of solitude that might be filled with thought or with emptiness, with contentment or with loneliness. Perhaps both, perhaps neither, perhaps something more complex than words can capture. The train has entered another forest now, descending steadily, and through gaps in the trees you catch glimpses of lights ahead. More than before, a whole constellation of them scattered across the darkness. Another town, perhaps, larger than the last, or perhaps you are simply closer to it, seeing more detail. The train seems to be heading directly toward these lights, and you watch them grow brighter and more numerous as you approach. This town, when you reach it, is larger indeed, spread along both sides of a wide valley, following the curves of a river that you cannot see in the darkness but whose presence you sense, the town shaped by its course. The train slows slightly, not stopping, but out of courtesy perhaps, or tradition, acknowledging the presence of human habitation even if it does not pause. You pass close enough to see into windows, to see the interiors of homes lit and warm, to see Christmas trees decorated with lights, families gathered in living rooms, the flicker of televisions, the glow of fireplaces. But the train does not stop, and soon the town is behind you, and the darkness and the forest and the snow return, and you are once more enclosed in that cocoon of warm solitude, the carriage your entire world, the journey your only reality. The tempo of the wheels resumes its familiar pattern, and you close your eyes for a moment, letting the darkness behind your eyelids match the darkness outside, letting the gentle swaying of the train move through you. When you open your eyes again, though you cannot say how much time has passed, whether seconds or minutes, the landscape has changed once more. The train is traveling now through a wide open valley. The mountains stepped back on either side, their profiles just visible against the slightly lighter darkness of the sky. The snow here lies deep and smooth, broken only by occasional fence posts or the dark shapes of hay bales, round and massive and half-buried. This is farmland, you realize, though dormant now under winter's grip, waiting for spring to return it to purpose. There are barns scattered across the valley, dark shapes with steep roofs, and beside many of them farmhouses with a few windows lit. Though most of the buildings are dark, the farmers sensibly asleep at this late hour. The train passes it all with its unchanging pace, and you watch the valley unspool beyond the window, endless and patient and quiet. And you think again of the house on the plateau, though now you think of it differently, from a new angle. You imagine what it might feel like to be that person, to have chosen that degree of solitude, to have climbed to that high place and decided to stay. You imagine the courage or the exhaustion or the necessity that might drive someone to such a choice, and you imagine also the peace that might follow once the choice was made, once the complications of other lives and other people fell away, leaving only the simple demands of survival and self-care. Only the long, slow rhythm of days and seasons. You imagine that they might not be unhappy, this solitary dweller on the mountain. You imagine that they might have found something there that the lower world could not offer. Silence, perhaps, or simplicity, or the freedom to exist without explanation, without justification. You imagine that they might stand at their window on nights like this and watch the train pass far below and feel something complicated, perhaps a momentary longing for connection, for community, for the warmth of shared spaces and shared lives, but perhaps also a relief that the train passes without stopping, that their solitude remains intact, that they are not required to explain themselves to anyone, not required to be anything other than what they are. The train begins to climb again, leaving the valley behind, entering a region where the snow has drifted into fantastic shapes, sculpted by wind into waves and curves that suggest motion even in stillness. The drifts are deep here, some of them higher than the train itself, and the tracks cut through them like a canal through water, walls of white rising on either side, and the train moves through this canyon of snow with steady determination, its wheels gripping the hidden rails, its engine breathing its rhythmic breath. And now, gradually, so gradually that you cannot pinpoint the moment it begins, you start to feel something changing. Not in the train, not in the landscape, but in yourself, in the quality of your attention, in the texture of your thoughts. You feel yourself settling more deeply into the moment, into the warmth and the motion and the gentle light, and the part of you that plans and worries and calculates begins to quiet, begins to recede, like someone walking backwards slowly into darkness until they disappear. Your breathing has slowed, you realize, without you consciously directing it. Each breath takes longer than the last, drawn in deeply, held for a moment at the top like a pause between sentences, then released slowly, completely, and there is a space at the bottom before the next breath begins. A space of perfect stillness, of emptiness, and in that space there is something like peace, something like rest. The train emerges from the drifts into another forest, and this forest is different from the others, older perhaps, or simply stranger. The trees here are massive, their branches bare of needles, skeletal against the sky, and the snow has covered them in ice, coating every branch and twig so that they glitter when the train's light touches them, turning the whole forest into a crystalline cathedral, all arches and pillars of ice-covered wood, all spaces of shadow between. It is beautiful, almost painfully so, and you find yourself pressing closer to the window to see it better, your breath fogging the glass, your eyes wide. The train moves through this frozen temple slowly, and you can see how the ice has created fantastic shapes, how it has dripped and frozen, building up layers until branches have become thick with it, until whole trees look like they have been carved from solid ice, like sculptures rather than living things. And you think, in a dreamy, distant way, that this is what winter does. It simplifies, it reduces, it strips away everything unnecessary until only essential structures remain, and then it covers even those in beauty, in ice and snow, transforming the stark into the sublime. And you think that perhaps the person living in that house on the plateau understood this, chose it deliberately, sought out that reduction, that simplification, that transformation. The frozen forest gives way gradually to more normal woods, the ice relinquishing its hold as the train descends again, and soon the trees are merely covered in snow once more, beautiful but no longer breathtaking, and you settle back in your seat, feeling the soft fabric against your back, feeling the warmth wrapped around you like an embrace. Your eyes are heavy now, you realize. The lids want to close, to stay closed, and when you let them, just for a moment, just to rest them, the darkness is soft and complete, and behind it you can still sense the motion of the train, still hear the rhythm of the wheels, but it all seems farther away now, filtered through layers of tiredness, layers of peace. You open your eyes again, not wanting to miss the journey, not yet, and outside the window the landscape continues its slow procession. More mountains, more forests, more valleys with their scattered lights. The snow falling endlessly, each flake following its inevitable path from sky to earth, adding its infinitesimal contribution to the accumulated depths below. The train carrying you forward, never stopping, never hurrying, patient as the snow itself. And you think about journeys, about all the journeys you have taken in your life and all the ones you have yet to take, and how each journey is also a kind of meditation, a moving through space that allows the mind to move through its own interior spaces, processing, sorting, releasing, finding patterns or dissolving them. You think about how the act of being carried, of surrendering control of motion to something else, a train, a boat, even a car driven by someone else, allows a particular kind of rest, a particular kind of freedom. You're going somewhere, and yet you are completely still, held in place while the world moves around you. The train curves through a long bend, and the motion presses you gently against the window, a soft pressure that is almost comforting, like a hand on your shoulder, and when the train straightens again, you remain there, your cheek against the cool glass, your body relaxed and heavy and at peace. Time continues to pass, unmeasured and unimportant. The landscape outside becomes a dream of itself, all the elements familiar but arranged in new ways. Snow and trees and mountains and sky combined and recombined in infinite variation. Sometimes there are lights in the distance, sometimes only darkness. Sometimes the moon appears between clouds, bright and cold and perfect, turning everything silver. Sometimes it's hidden, and starlight alone illuminates the world, dimmer but somehow more intimate. And always the train moves forward, and always the wheels maintain their rhythm, and always the warmth holds you safe, and the amber light glows steadily, and the snow falls and falls and falls. You find your thoughts returning once more to the house on the mountain, and to its solitary occupant, and now your imaginings have deepened, become more complex, more sympathetic. You imagine that this person was not always alone, that once they lived in the lower world among people, engaged in all the complications of human society. You imagine them young once, full of purpose and energy, believing that they could make a difference, that they could change things, help things, improve things. And you imagine the slow erosion of that belief, not through any single event, but through accumulation, through repetition, through the gradual understanding that most things cannot be changed, that most people cannot be helped unless they wish to be, that the world is far more complex and resistant to improvement than youthful idealism can comprehend. You imagine the exhaustion that comes from such understanding, the particular weariness of someone who has tried and tried and tried, and finally accepted that trying is not enough, that intention does not guarantee result, that sometimes the best you can do is simply stop, step back, climb away. And you imagine the relief that might follow such acceptance, the lightness that comes after years of carrying weight you are never meant to carry. You imagine them arriving at that house, perhaps years ago, perhaps decades, traveling up the mountain with their few possessions, standing in the empty rooms and feeling the silence settle around them like snow, gentle and complete and infinitely deep. You imagine them learning to live alone, discovering rhythms that suited only themselves, learning to hear their own thoughts without the constant interruption of other voices, other needs, other expectations. You imagine them learning to be content with their own company, learning that solitude is not the same as loneliness, that silence is not the same as emptiness. You imagine them finding pleasure in simple things, the way light falls through a window at a particular hour, the taste of tea drunk slowly by the fire, the sight of fresh snow unmarked by any footprint, the sound of wind in the eaves, the warmth of blankets on a cold night. You imagine them growing older there, their face weathering, their body slowing, but their mind perhaps growing clearer, growing quieter, finding a kind of peace that had eluded them in the world below. And you imagine them now, tonight, in that room with the lighted window, perhaps standing at the glass and looking out at the falling snow, perhaps sitting in a chair with a book forgotten in their lap, perhaps simply staring into the fire and thinking thoughts that have no words, that exist only as feelings, as images, as the soft, formless content of a mind at rest. And you realize, with a start of recognition that is not quite surprise, That you understand this person, that despite having never seen them, never known them, you understand what drove them to that high place and what keeps them there. You understand because some part of you shares that same impulse, that same need for quiet, for simplicity, for distance from the noise and complication of the world. You understand because you too have felt the weight of other people's needs and expectations, have felt the exhaustion of trying to be what others require, have felt the longing for a place where you could simply exist without performance, without justification, without constant explanation. The train has climbed to a high place now, and outside the window there is almost nothing visible. Just snow and darkness and occasional ghostly shapes that might be trees or rocks, or simply tricks of light and shadow. The train seems to be traveling along the very edge of the world, along some final ridge beyond which there is only emptiness, only sky, only the vast darkness between stars. And in this high place, in this darkness, you feel yourself letting go of something, though you cannot name what it is. Some tension, perhaps, some resistance, some holding on that you have maintained for so long that you have forgotten you were maintaining it. You feel it releasing like breath, like snow falling from an overladen branch, and in its absence there is space, there is lightness, there is a sense of expansion as though you have suddenly become larger, or perhaps the world has become smaller, or perhaps the boundary between you and the world has dissolved, leaving you continuous with the darkness and the snow and the infinite quiet. Your body has grown very heavy, very relaxed, and you no longer feel the separate parts of yourself. Feet, legs, hands, arms, chest, head, but rather a unified field of sensation, warm and comfortable and at peace. Your breathing continues its slow rhythm, synchronized with the wheels, with the swaying of the carriage, with the falling of the snow, and each breath seems to take you deeper into stillness, into rest. The train begins to descend again, slowly, carefully, and now through the darkness you can see, far below, the faint glow of dawn beginning. The eastern sky just barely lighter than the rest, a suggestion of gray in the universal black. But dawn is hours away still. You know this somehow. Know that this is just the first whisper of its approach, the very earliest intimation that night will not last forever, that light will return, but not yet, not soon. There is still ample darkness left, ample time for rest. The train levels out, traveling now through a broad valley, and ahead you can see lights, many lights, more than any town you've passed so far. A city, perhaps, though you cannot see its shape, only the glow it casts against the low clouds, turning them amber and rose. The train moves toward this glow, but slowly, so slowly, and you watch it brighten gradually. Watch the individual lights begin to resolve themselves from the general illumination, becoming street lamps, building lights, the headlights of vehicles moving along distant roads. But the train does not enter the city. Instead, it curves around it, following the valley's edge, keeping to the higher ground, and the city passes to your left, close enough to see its outlines, its towers and bridges and wide streets, but separate, untouched, its own world with its own rhythms and concerns. You watch it pass without regret, content to observe from this distance, from this moving warmth, and you think that perhaps this is another thing the mountain dweller understood, that it is possible to appreciate the lights of the city while choosing not to enter it, to acknowledge its existence and validity, while knowing it is not for you, not anymore, perhaps not ever again. The train curves away from the city, and the lights fade behind you, and the darkness and the snow return, and with them comes a deeper quiet, as though even the city's distant presence had been a kind of noise. And now that it's gone, the silence is more complete, more absolute. And you feel yourself sinking deeper into your seat, your head resting now against the seat back, your eyes closing despite your wish to keep watching, to keep witnessing this journey. But your body has other needs, other priorities, and sleep is calling to you with insistent gentleness, and you are too tired, too relaxed, too at peace to resist. The last thing you see before your eyes close for more than a moment is the window beside you, and reflected in it, ghostly and transparent, your own face looking back at you, overlaid on the darkness and snow beyond. And in your reflected face you see something you did not expect to see. Something soft, something peaceful, something that looks almost like contentment, and you realize that this journey has done something to you, has changed something, has loosened something that was tight, has warmed something that was cold. And you think of the mountain dweller one final time, and you send them a thought, a wish, across the distance and the darkness, a hope that they are well, that they are warm, that they are at peace in their high solitude. And you imagine that perhaps they feel it. Perhaps they pause in whatever they are doing and look toward the window and see the train's distant lights moving through the night below, and feel something shift in their chest. Something warm, something like recognition, something like kinship. And you imagine that perhaps they smile, just slightly, just for a moment, and then return to their fire, to their silence, to their chosen life. And you are glad for them, glad that they found what they needed, glad that they had the courage to climb away from the world and to stay climbed away. And glad, too, that you have this moment of understanding them, of knowing them without meeting them, of sharing something essential even across the distance. The train moves on through the night, and you move with it, carried forward through snow and darkness and time, safe in your warm carriage, surrounded by amber light and the gentle rhythm of wheels on rails. And your breathing slows and deepens, and your thoughts become softer, less distinct, more like dreams than thoughts, and the boundary between waking and sleeping grows thin and permeable and finally dissolves altogether, and you cannot say whether you are asleep or awake, and it does not matter, and nothing matters except the warmth and the motion and the deep, pervading sense of peace, of rightness, of exactly where you are supposed to be, exactly when you are supposed to be there. And the train carries you onward through the winter night, through snow that falls and falls and falls, through forests that have stood for centuries and will stand for centuries more, past frozen rivers and sleeping towns and mountains that hold up the sky, and the journey continues, will continue, has always been continuing, and you are part of it now, woven into its rhythm, held in its movement, carried in its care. And somewhere on a high plateau, in a house pressed against a mountain's flank, a light burns in a window, steady and warm, and someone stands there looking out at the falling snow, and they see or remember or imagine a train moving through the darkness below, and they feel something complicated. Loneliness perhaps, or peace, or both, or neither, or something else entirely, something that has no name but is nonetheless real, nonetheless true, nonetheless exactly what it should be. And the snow falls, and the train moves, and the night holds all of it gently, holds you gently, holds everything that exists in winter darkness, and it is enough, more than enough. It is everything, it is complete. Your breathing has become so slow now that there are long pauses between breaths, and in those pauses there is perfect stillness, perfect silence, perfect peace. And the train rocks you gently, and the warmth enfolds you, and the amber light glows steadily, and the snow falls past the window in endless procession, and you rest, you rest, you rest, held safe and warm and carried forward, and there is nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, no need for anything beyond this moment, this motion, this deep and all-encompassing ease. And slowly, so slowly that you cannot mark the transition, sleep takes you completely, draws you down into its soft darkness, into dreams that are gentle and formless and kind. And the train moves on without you needing to witness it, carries you forward without you needing to direct it, and the journey continues, endless and patient and sure, carrying you through the winter night toward dawn, toward morning, toward whatever comes next, but not yet. Not now. Now there is only darkness and warmth and motion and peace. Only the deep rest of a body and mind that have finally, after so long, been given permission to simply let go, to simply be, to simply rest. And in that rest there is healing, and in that darkness there is safety, and in that motion there is a kind of freedom, and the train moves on through snow that falls eternally, through a winter that has no end and needs no end, through a night that is not frightening but comforting, not cold but warm, not empty but full, full of peace, full of silence, full of the deep, nourishing rest that your body and soul have been seeking without knowing they were seeking it. And you sleep, finally and fully and completely, held safe in the warm carriage of a train that travels through endless winter, and the wheels turn with their steady rhythm, and the snow falls with its infinite patience, and the world outside continues its slow revolution of mountain and valley, forest and town, darkness and light, all of it held together in a pattern too large to see, but perfectly ordered nonetheless. And you are part of that pattern, woven into it, essential to it, and in your sleeping, you fulfill your role perfectly. Simply by being, simply by breathing, simply by allowing yourself to be carried. And the hours pass like dreams, like snowflakes, like breath, one following another in seamless succession, and the train never stops, never hurries, never wavers from its steady forward motion, and you sleep through it all, deep and dreamless and perfectly at peace. And somewhere ahead, dawn is gathering its light, preparing its gentle return, but it will be gentle when it comes. It will not startle or alarm. It will simply arrive in its own time, as inevitable and welcome as spring after winter, as morning after night. But that is still hours away, and right now there is only this: darkness and warmth and motion and the deep, untroubled sleep of someone who has finally found what they were looking for without ever knowing they were searching. Someone who has been carried at last to the place they needed to be, even if that place is not a location but a state of being, a state of rest, a state of peace so complete that it needs no justification, no explanation, no defense, but simply exists, simply is, simply offers itself freely to anyone weary enough, brave enough, or lost enough to accept it. And you accept it, you rest in it, you surrender to it completely, and the train carries you onward through the snow-filled night, and the wheels turn their endless rhythm, and your breath rises and falls in perfect time. And somewhere in the darkness a light burns steadily in a window, and someone stands watch over the sleeping world. And it is all connected, all part of the same vast pattern, the same infinite gentleness, the same encompassing peace. And you sleep, and the snow falls, and the train moves on, and the night holds everything softly, and there is nothing more that needs to happen, nothing more that needs to be said, nothing more that needs to be done. Only this endless present moment of rest and warmth and motion, extending forward into time like a long exhalation, like a prayer, like the slow falling of snow onto snow, layer upon layer, depth upon depth, building towards something that cannot be rushed, cannot be forced, but must simply accumulate at its own pace, in its own time, until finally, eventually, when the moment is exactly right and not a second sooner, the world will shift, the light will change, and morning will come, gentle and inevitable as breath, and you will wake to find yourself exactly where you are, safe and warm and at peace, carried through darkness to dawn, through winter to the promise of spring, through the long night of weariness to the first light of rest. But not yet, not now. Now there is only sleep, only darkness, only warmth, only the endless patient motion of the train carrying you forward through a night that seems to have no end and needs no end, through snow that falls eternally, through a journey that is both movement and stillness, both arrival and departure, both everything and nothing, both exactly what it seems and infinitely more than it seems. And you rest there, in that paradox, in that perfect moment that stretches beyond time, and you are safe, and you are warm, and you are carried, and there is nothing more to want, nothing more to need, nothing more to seek, only this deep and final and complete surrender to rest, to peace, to the gentle eternal motion of being carried through darkness toward light, toward morning, toward home.